They say love is blind, but I never expected it to be literally true. When I married Princess Zarathel of the Vortak Empire, I thought I was saving Earth from annihilation through a desperate diplomatic marriage. What I didn't know was that my new wife had been deceiving her own people about a secret that would either unite our species forever or spark the greatest interstellar war in galactic history. The funny thing about marrying someone who's never seen your face? She fell in love with your soul first. And, when she finally gained the ability to see, what she discovered about humans would change everything we thought we knew about ourselves. This is the story of how a failed xenobiologist from Earth became the most wanted man in the galaxy, all because he showed an alien princess what it truly means to be human. Dr. Marcus Chen had never imagined his career would end with him standing in the cargo hold of an alien dreadnought, wearing an ill-fitting diplomatic uniform and clutching a bouquet of earth flowers that probably meant something offensive in Vortak culture. The irony wasn't lost on him that after spending 15 years studying xenobiology, he was about to become a specimen himself. The Vortak Empire had appeared in Earth's solar system 3 months ago with a fleet that could crack planets like eggs. Their ultimatum was simple: submit to annexation or face complete annihilation. Earth's governments had scrambled for any diplomatic solution, and, somehow, Marcus had become that solution. Princess Zarathel of the Vortak Empire was blind. Born with a rare genetic condition that affected her species' unique ability to perceive electromagnetic spectrums beyond human comprehension, she had never seen another being. The Vortak considered this a great shame, as their culture placed enormous value on visual beauty and symmetry. When Earth's desperate diplomats learned of her condition, they hatched a plan that was either brilliant or completely insane. Marcus Chen, unremarkable in every way that mattered to human society, would marry the princess. The theory was that since she couldn't see him, his appearance wouldn't matter, and perhaps they could build some kind of genuine connection that might soften her heart toward humanity. It was a long shot wrapped in cultural speculation and tied together with the kind of desperation that only comes when extinction is the alternative. The cargo hold doors hissed open, and Marcus got his first look at his bride-to-be. Princess Zarathel was tall, easily 7 feet, with the characteristic crystalline skin of the Vortak that seemed to shimmer with internal light. Her eyes were completely white, lacking the prismatic irises that allowed her people to see across multiple spectrums. She moved with grace despite her blindness, guided by some other sense that Marcus couldn't identify. Behind her stood Commander Vextar, the princess's personal guard and the being who had negotiated the marriage terms. His presence radiated barely contained violence, and Marcus suspected that the slightest wrong move would result in his immediate death. "Princess Zarathel," Marcus said, attempting the formal greeting he'd practiced. His pronunciation was probably terrible, but she tilted her head in what might have been acknowledgement. "Dr. Chen," she replied in perfect English, her voice carrying harmonics that human vocal cords couldn't produce. "You are smaller than I expected." Marcus blinked. "I'm sorry, how did you know that?" "I can sense the displacement of air around your form, the resonance of your voice, the electrical patterns of your nervous system. Your people assume that because I cannot see as my kind do, I am helpless. This is incorrect." The wedding ceremony was unlike anything Marcus had ever imagined. Conducted in a chamber that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, with Vortak nobles whose crystalline forms created a kaleidoscope of reflected light, it felt more like a fever dream than a diplomatic event. Marcus spoke words he didn't understand, touched artifacts that made his fingers tingle with alien energy, and, somehow, legally bound himself to a being from another world. Throughout the ceremony, Princess Zarathel remained composed, answering the ritual questions with practiced precision. But Marcus noticed something the others missed: the slight tremor in her hands when she touched the bonding crystal, the way her breathing changed when he spoke his vows. She was nervous too. After the ceremony, Marcus was escorted to what would be his new quarters aboard the Vortak flagship. The rooms were designed for beings much larger than humans, but accommodations had been made. There was even a section with Earth-normal atmosphere and gravity, though the air still carried the ozone scent that pervaded all Vortak ships. His wife arrived an hour later, moving through the space with the confidence of someone who had memorized every detail. She had changed from her ceremonial robes into something simpler, though the garments still seemed to be woven from light itself. "You are afraid," she observed, settling onto a chair that adjusted itself to her form. "Terrified," Marcus admitted. There seemed little point in lying to someone who could apparently read his nervous system like a book. Good. Fear shows wisdom. You have bound yourself to something you do not understand, for reasons that may not survive contact with reality. Are you going to have me killed? Princess Zarathel made a sound that might have been laughter. Not immediately. I am curious about you, Dr. Chen. Your people chose you specifically for this marriage. Not your finest diplomat, not your most attractive specimen, not even someone of political importance. A xenobiologist whose career was considered failed by your own academic standards. Marcus winced. His lack of significant discoveries had indeed made him something of a laughingstock in his field. I study life. I try to understand how different forms of consciousness might think and feel. I'm not particularly good at it. And, yet here you are. Tell me, Dr. Chen, do you know why I agreed to this marriage? Political alliance? Curiosity about humans? I honestly have no idea. Because I am tired of being pitted by my own people. They see my blindness as a tragedy, a princess who can never appreciate the beauty of her empire. They speak of me in whispers, wondering what use a blind royal could possibly be. Your people offered me something I have never had, a companion who might value me for qualities other than my ability to perceive light. This confession hung in the air between them. Marcus realized that both of them were outcasts in their own way, he for his professional failures, she for her disability. It wasn't the foundation for a marriage that anyone would recommend, but it was honest. I should tell you, Marcus said slowly, I have no idea how to be married to anyone, let alone an alien princess. I've never been good with relationships. Then, we are well matched. I have never been good at being a princess. Over the following days, Marcus learned that life aboard a Vorthack dreadnought was nothing like he'd expected. The ship was less a military vessel and, more a mobile city, housing thousands of beings from across the Empire. The Vorthack, he discovered, were not the monolithic conquerors that Earth's media had portrayed. They were a complex society with their own internal conflicts, artistic traditions, and philosophical debates. Princess Zarathel proved to be an invaluable guide to this new world. Despite her blindness, or perhaps because of it, she seemed to understand the subtleties of Vorthack society in ways that sighted beings missed. She could read the emotional states of others through what she called resonance patterns, the unique ways that each individual's bioelectric field interacted with their environment. Your people fascinate me, she told Marcus as they shared what passed for breakfast in their quarters. Most species we encounter have relatively simple electromagnetic signatures. But humans generate incredibly complex patterns. It's as if you're constantly creating multiple layers of reality simultaneously. What do you mean? When you speak to me, your conscious mind forms words, but your subconscious generates entirely different patterns. You're experiencing doubt, curiosity, attraction, fear, and hope all at the same time. Most beings experience these emotions sequentially, but humans seem to layer them. Marcus found himself genuinely intrigued by her perceptions. Can you read all humans this way? Only when I focus. It's actually quite overwhelming. Your species generates what I can only describe as emotional music. Complex, layered, sometimes discordant, but always dynamic. As they talked, Marcus began to realize that his bride was not just intelligent but brilliant. Her insights into consciousness and perception far exceeded anything in human psychology textbooks. She had developed her own theories about the nature of awareness, tested through her unique way of experiencing the world. There's something I need to tell you, Zarathel said during their 5th day together. Something that could change everything between our peoples. Before she could continue, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Commander Vextar's voice echoed through the communication system, speaking rapid Vorthack that Marcus couldn't follow. But he didn't need translation to understand the urgency in the commander's tone. Princess Zarathel went very still, her head tilted in concentration. We need to get to the command deck immediately. What's happening? Something that should not be possible. The patterns I'm sensing from the bridge suggest that the crew has discovered something about Earth that they didn't expect. Something that has frightened them. As they made their way through corridors filled with agitated Vorthack crew members, Marcus felt a growing dread. He had been so focused on his personal situation that he hadn't considered what else his marriage might reveal. What if bringing a human aboard the flagship had exposed something about his species that Earth would rather keep hidden? The command deck was in chaos when they arrived. Massive screens displayed what looked like sensor readings, but the data meant nothing to Marcus. Commander Vextar was engaged in heated discussion with several other officers, their crystalline forms flashing with agitation. "Commander," Princess Zarathel called out, switching to English for Marcus's benefit. "Report." Vextar turned to them, his expression unreadable but his bioelectric field apparently screaming with confusion if Zarathel's reaction was any indication. "Princess, we have detected massive energy signatures from the human's homeworld. Structures that should not exist, technology that appears to be more advanced than our own sensors can properly analyze." Marcus felt his heart stop. "That's impossible. Earth doesn't have any technology more advanced than basic fusion power and primitive faster-than-light communication." "That is what we believed," Vextar replied grimly. "But either the humans have been concealing their true capabilities, or something else entirely is happening on their world." The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. If Earth had been hiding advanced technology, his marriage could be seen as an intelligence-gathering operation. If something else was happening on his homeworld, it might be even worse. Either way, the delicate diplomatic situation they were trying to navigate had just become infinitely more complicated. Princess Zarathel moved to his side, her hand finding his arm with unerring accuracy. "Dr. Chen, I need you to be completely honest with me. Is there anything about your planet, your people, or your presence here that you have not disclosed?" Marcus met her white, unseeing eyes and realized that his answer might determine not just his fate, but the fate of both their species. The problem was, he genuinely had no idea what the Vortac sensors had detected, and that ignorance might be the most dangerous thing of all. Marcus stared at the sensor displays, watching patterns of energy that defied everything he knew about Earth's technological capabilities. The readouts showed massive underground structures spanning entire continents, power sources that dwarfed anything human civilization had ever built, and what appeared to be a planetary defense grid that had been completely invisible to human detection methods. "I swear to you," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I have never seen anything like this before. If Earth has this technology, they've kept it hidden from their own scientists." Princess Zarathel's expression was unreadable, but Marcus could feel the tension radiating from her form. Around them, Vortac officers continued their urgent discussions, their crystalline skin flickering with patterns that he was beginning to recognize as emotional states. Commander Vextar approached them, his massive form casting shadows across the display screens. "Dr. Chen, you understand that if your people have deceived us about their capabilities, this marriage becomes an act of war rather than diplomacy." "I understand the implications," Marcus replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "But I'm telling you the truth. I've spent my entire career studying life on other worlds precisely because Earth seems so technologically limited. If we had access to power sources like these, why would we still be struggling with climate change and resource scarcity?" It was Princess Zarathel who provided the answer that chilled them all. "Because what we're seeing isn't human technology." The command deck fell silent except for the humming of ship systems. Marcus felt a cold certainty settle in his stomach as the implications of her words became clear. "You think something else is on Earth?" he asked. "I think something else has been on Earth for a very long time," she replied. "The energy patterns are wrong for human technology. They're too elegant, too perfectly integrated with your planet's natural systems. This infrastructure has been growing for centuries, possibly millennia." Commander Vextar's form flashed a deep crimson that Marcus had learned indicated extreme alarm. If Earth harbors another advanced species, and they have chosen to reveal themselves now, it suggests they see the current situation as a threat. Marcus felt the weight of galactic politics settling on his shoulders like a lead blanket. "You think they're responding to your fleet?" "It would explain the timing," Princess Zarathel said. "But it also means that your planet is far more dangerous than we anticipated. The question is whether these beings are allies or enemies of humanity." The next several hours passed in a blur of emergency conferences and strategic planning. Marcus found himself in the surreal position of being consulted about his own planet's defenses by beings who seemed to know more about Earth than he did. The irony was bitter. He had married an alien princess to save his world, only to discover that his world might not need saving at all. During a brief break in the discussions, Princess Zarathel requested a private meeting in their quarters. Marcus followed her through corridors now filled with purposeful urgency as the Vorthak fleet repositioned itself to what they hoped was a safe distance from Earth. "You are broadcasting confusion and fear in equal measure," she observed as soon as they were alone. "Wouldn't you be? I've just discovered that everything I thought I knew about my homeworld is wrong." "Perhaps. But I sense something more specific in your emotional patterns. You are not just confused about the situation, you are confused about yourself." Marcus slumped into one of the adapted human-sized chairs. "I keep wondering why Earth's governments chose me for this mission. If there are other beings on our planet with advanced technology, surely they would have better candidates than a failed xenobiologist." Princess Zarathel moved to the viewport that dominated one wall of their quarters. Even though she couldn't see the stars streaming past, she seemed to find comfort in facing them. "Tell me about your research, Dr. Chen. Not the failures, but what you were actually trying to accomplish." "I was studying consciousness," Marcus said slowly. "Specifically, how different forms of life might develop awareness and intelligence. My theory was that consciousness isn't just an emergent property of complex brains, but something that arises from the interaction between living systems and their environment." "And this theory was considered a failure?" "Because I couldn't prove it. I couldn't even design experiments that would test it properly. My colleagues said I was chasing philosophical ghosts instead of doing real science." Princess Zarathel turned from the viewport, and, for a moment, Marcus could swear she was looking directly at him despite her blindness. "What if your theory wasn't wrong, but simply incomplete?" Before Marcus could ask what she meant, their conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the bridge. Commander Vextar's voice filled the room with barely controlled excitement. "Princess, Dr. Chen, you need to see this immediately." They rushed back to the command deck, where the main display now showed a real-time image of Earth. But it wasn't the blue marble that Marcus remembered from every astronomy textbook. Vast geometric patterns of light were becoming visible across the planet's surface, forming networks that spanned oceans and continents. The hidden infrastructure was revealing itself, and it was beautiful in a way that made Marcus's heart ache. "It's a message," Princess Zarathel said with certainty. "How can you tell?" Marcus asked. "Because the patterns are generating harmonics that resonate with your bioelectric field. Whatever is creating this display is specifically attuned to human consciousness." Commander Vextar gestured to the communications station. "We're receiving a transmission on frequencies that our equipment can barely detect. The signal is being directed specifically at this ship." The voice that emerged from the speakers was unmistakably human, but carried undertones that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than any human throat. It spoke in perfect English, but with the measured cadence of something very old and very patient. "Greetings to the Vorthak Empire and to our human ambassador. I am speaking for the Collective of Earth, a partnership between humanity and those who have shared their world for longer than your history's record. We welcome this opportunity for open contact." Marcus felt the bottom drop out of his universe. Collective of Earth? I've never heard of any collective. The voice continued as if it had heard his comment. "Dr. Marcus Chen, your selection for this mission was not random. Your research into consciousness and environmental interaction identified you as someone capable of understanding the true nature of Earth's biosphere. We have been waiting for the right moment to reveal ourselves, and your marriage to Princess Zarathel provides the perfect opportunity." Princess Zarathel stepped forward. "I am Princess Zarathel of the Vorthak Empire. Who are you, and what do you want?" "We are what humans would call a symbiotic intelligence, Princess. We have existed alongside humanity since their species began developing agriculture. We have guided them subtly, helped them avoid the worst excesses of their development, and prepared for the day when they would take their place among the galactic community." Marcus's mind raced as pieces of a cosmic puzzle began falling into place. "You're saying that human civilization has been influenced by another species all along?" "Not influenced, Dr. Chen. Enhanced. Humanity possesses a unique form of consciousness that generates what you might call resonance fields, patterns of thought and emotion that can directly affect the quantum structure of reality. This ability is what Princess Zarathel has been sensing, and it is why we chose to remain hidden until now. The implications were staggering. Marcus looked at his wife, seeing new understanding dawn in her white eyes. That's why human electromagnetic signatures are so complex. We're not just thinking, we're reshaping reality at a quantum level. Precisely. And it is why the Vorthak Empire's arrival presented both an opportunity and a danger. If humanity were to be enslaved or destroyed, the galaxy would lose something irreplaceable. But if our partnership could be revealed through peaceful contact, it might usher in a new era of interstellar cooperation. Commander Vextar's form was cycling through colors that Marcus had never seen before, indicating emotional states that probably didn't have human equivalents. You are saying that the humans possess abilities that could benefit the entire galaxy? More than benefit, Commander. Humans can literally think new realities into existence, given the right circumstances and understanding. But this ability requires freedom, creativity, and the kind of complex emotional states that Princess Zarathel has been observing. It cannot be forced or controlled. Princess Zarathel moved closer to Marcus, her hand finding his with the precision of someone who navigated entirely through other senses. This is why you were chosen, isn't it? Not because you were expendable, but because you were the human most likely to understand and accept this revelation. The voice from Earth confirmed her suspicion. Dr. Chen's research brought him closer to understanding the true nature of consciousness than any human scientist before him. His willingness to sacrifice himself for his species demonstrated the kind of emotional complexity that makes human consciousness so powerful. And his marriage to you, Princess, created the perfect bridge between species. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was being revealed. So what happens now? Do humans join the galactic community as equals, or are we going to be studied like lab rats because of our abilities? That, said the voice, depends entirely on what happens next between you and your wife. Your marriage was intended as a diplomatic gesture, but it has become something far more significant. You represent the first true union between species with complementary conscious abilities. Princess Zarathel's capacity to perceive reality directly through electromagnetic resonance, combined with humanity's ability to influence that reality through focused thought and emotion, could create something entirely new. Princess Zarathel's grip on Marcus's hand tightened. You're suggesting that our marriage could be more than symbolic. We're suggesting that your marriage could be the first step toward a new form of consciousness that spans species. But only if it develops naturally, through genuine connection and mutual understanding. Commander Vextar stepped forward, his massive form still cycling through agitated colors. And if it does not develop? If this union fails? The silence from the speakers stretched long enough to make everyone uncomfortable. Finally, the voice responded with a weight that seemed to press against their minds. Then, both our species will have to find their own ways forward, without the benefits that true cooperation might bring. The galaxy is vast, and there are many paths through it. Some lead to growth and enlightenment. Others lead to isolation and eventual extinction. As the transmission ended, Marcus realized that the pressure he felt wasn't just diplomatic anymore. The fate of human civilization might literally depend on whether he could make a real marriage work with an alien princess who could read his emotions like an open book. No pressure at all. The days following the revelation from Earth passed in a haze of diplomatic meetings, scientific conferences, and private conversations that would have been impossible just a week earlier. Marcus found himself at the center of discussions that spanned everything from quantum mechanics to interstellar politics, all while trying to navigate the increasingly complex relationship with his alien wife. Princess Zarathel had become fascinated by what the Earth Collective had revealed about human consciousness. She spent hours with Marcus, mapping the patterns of his thoughts and emotions with a precision that was both scientifically valuable and deeply intimate. "Your fear is fascinating," she told him during one of their evening sessions together. "Most beings experience fear as a simple warning system: danger detected, take evasive action. But human fear generates cascading patterns of possibility. You don't just fear what is happening, you fear what might happen, and what might happen because of what might happen. Marcus was lying on what passed for a couch in their quarters, electrodes attached to his temples while Zarathel's equipment translated his bioelectric patterns into visual displays she couldn't see but could interpret through resonance. "That sounds like a design flaw rather than a special ability," he said. "On the contrary, it's extraordinarily sophisticated. Your consciousness doesn't just react to reality, it constantly models alternative realities and evaluates their probability. That's what creates the quantum resonance effects that the Earth Collective mentioned." Marcus turned to study his wife's profile. Over the past weeks, he had grown accustomed to her otherworldly beauty, but, more importantly, he had begun to appreciate the keen intelligence behind her unseeing eyes. "Can you sense it? The reality-shaping thing? I can sense the potential for it. When you're deeply focused on a problem or emotionally invested in an outcome, the quantum field around you becomes highly unstable. It's as if reality is waiting for you to decide what should happen next." This revelation had prompted a series of experiments that were equal parts scientific research and marriage counseling. Working together, Marcus and Zarathel discovered that they could indeed influence reality in small but measurable ways. When Marcus focused intensely on a desired outcome while Zarathel provided precise sensory feedback about quantum field fluctuations, they could affect everything from random number generators to the behavior of subatomic particles. The implications were staggering, and they drew attention from across the galaxy. The Vortak Empire's top scientists arrived to study the phenomenon, followed by representatives from a dozen other spacefaring civilizations. Marcus's quarters became an impromptu laboratory where the fundamental nature of consciousness was being rewritten. But it was during a quiet moment between experiments that Marcus made a discovery that changed everything. "Zarathel," he said, watching her adjust the sensitivity on her resonance detection equipment, "what would you want to see if you could see anything?" She paused, her graceful hands stilling on the controls. It was a question no one had ever asked her before. "I used to think I wanted to see beauty," she said slowly. "The crystalline gardens of my homeworld, the light sculptures of our greatest artists, the way starlight reflects off the hull of a ship. But now I think I would want to see you." The honesty in her voice hit Marcus like a physical force. Over the weeks of their marriage, something genuine had been growing between them, not just scientific collaboration, but real affection and respect. "Why me?" he asked. "Because you are the first being I have ever known whose inner beauty matches their actions. I can sense the patterns of your thoughts, the resonance of your emotions, the way you respond to new ideas and challenging situations. You are beautiful in ways that have nothing to do with appearance." Marcus felt something shift inside him, a loosening of barriers he hadn't even known existed. "Zarathel, I think I might be falling in love with you." The moment he spoke the words, every piece of monitoring equipment in the room began registering off-the-scale readings. The quantum field fluctuations that Zarathel had been tracking suddenly spiked to levels that shouldn't have been possible, and, for just an instant, something extraordinary happened. Princess Zarathel gasped and staggered backward, her white eyes suddenly flooding with prismatic light. For a fraction of a second, she could see, not just electromagnetic radiation, but the full spectrum of reality that her people took for granted. And the first thing she saw was Marcus's face, filled with love and wonder and the kind of complex emotional beauty that she had been sensing but never imagined. The vision lasted only a moment before her eyes returned to their usual white, but the impact was permanent. She sank into a chair, trembling with the aftershock of sudden sight. "What just happened?" Marcus asked, rushing to her side. "You happened," she said, tears streaming down her crystalline cheeks. "Your love, your genuine affection for who I am rather than what I look like, it created a resonance field so pure that it temporarily restored my sight." The implications hit them both simultaneously. If human emotional states could temporarily heal genetic disabilities in other species, the potential applications were limitless. But, more personally, they had discovered that their marriage was becoming something real and powerful. Commander Vextar arrived within minutes, alerted by the equipment readings. Behind him came a delegation of Vortak medical specialists and quantum physicists, all eager to understand what had caused the unprecedented energy spike. "Princess, are you injured?" Vextar asked, his form flickering with concern. "Not injured, Commander. Healed. Temporarily, but still healed." She explained what had happened, and the room fell silent as everyone processed the implications. Dr. Kethvar, the Vortak Empire's leading expert on consciousness research, stepped forward. Princess, if this effect can be reproduced, it would revolutionize our understanding of genetic medicine. But, more than that, it suggests that the bond between species consciousness can create effects that neither species could achieve alone. Marcus found himself at the center of another whirlwind of activity as scientists from across the galaxy descended on their quarters. But, this time felt different. Instead of being studied as a curiosity, he and Zarathel were being recognized as pioneers of something entirely new. The Earth Collective reached out again during this period, offering additional insights into human consciousness and its potential applications. They revealed that human emotional states had been subtly influencing Earth's biosphere for millennia, helping to maintain the delicate balance that allowed life to thrive even as human civilization grew more complex. Your species has always been gardeners of reality, the collective explained during one of their communications. But, you've been gardening unconsciously, without understanding your true capabilities. Princess Zarathel's abilities allow her to see and guide these effects consciously. The next major breakthrough came when Marcus and Zarathel attempted to combine their abilities in a more structured way. Working with a team of researchers from multiple species, they developed techniques for what became known as consciousness bridging, the deliberate linking of different types of awareness to achieve effects that neither could accomplish alone. Their first major success was healing a Vortak child who had been born with severe neural defects. By focusing his emotional energy on the concept of perfect neural development while Zarathel provided precise guidance about quantum field manipulation, Marcus was able to literally think the child's brain into a healthier configuration. The child's recovery was complete and permanent, and news of the healing spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Suddenly, the union between a failed xenobiologist and a blind alien princess was being hailed as the most significant development in galactic history. But, with fame came danger. Not everyone in the galaxy welcomed the idea that humans possessed reality-shaping abilities, or that those abilities could be enhanced through cooperation with other species. Several aggressive civilizations began to see Earth not as a potential ally, but as a threat that needed to be controlled or eliminated. The first attempt on Marcus's life came during what should have been a routine diplomatic reception. An assassin from the Kethmori Empire, a species that prized genetic purity above all else, managed to infiltrate the Vortak flagship with a weapon designed specifically to disrupt human neural activity. The attack failed not because of any security measures, but because Princess Zarathel sensed the assassin's hostile intent through the disturbances in the local quantum field. Her warning gave Marcus just enough time to focus his consciousness defensively, creating a resonance barrier that deflected the weapon's effects. The would-be assassin was captured, but his presence revealed a disturbing truth: Marcus and Zarathel's growing abilities had made them targets for anyone who feared what human consciousness might be capable of. "We need to be careful," Zarathel said as they reviewed security reports in their quarters. "Our success is creating as many enemies as allies." "Maybe we should slow down," Marcus suggested. "Keep our abilities secret until we understand them better. Or maybe we need to accelerate our research. If hostile species are already moving against us, hiding our capabilities won't protect us for long." It was Commander Vextar who provided the perspective they needed. "Princess, Dr. Chen, you are no longer just individuals exploring an unusual marriage. Whether you intended it or not, you have become symbols of what interspecies cooperation can achieve. That makes you valuable to your allies and dangerous to your enemies." Marcus realized that they had crossed a line they couldn't uncross. Their personal relationship had become a political force that would reshape galactic civilization one way or another. The question was whether they could guide that transformation in a positive direction, or whether the forces they had unleashed would destroy them both. As he lay next to his alien wife that night, listening to her breathe in harmonics that human lungs couldn't produce, Marcus marveled at how completely his life had changed. He had gone from being a failure to being one of the most important humans alive, all because he had been willing to marry someone sight unseen. The irony was that now that Zarathel could occasionally see through their emotional connection, she saw him more clearly than anyone ever had. And, somehow, miraculously, she still loved what she saw. 6 months after the first assassination attempt, Marcus found himself standing in the Grand Assembly of the Galactic Council, facing representatives from over 200 civilizations. The massive chamber stretched beyond human comprehension, with beings of every conceivable form arranged in concentric circles around the central speaking platform. He felt their collective attention like a physical weight. Princess Zarathel stood beside him, her presence both comforting and intimidating. In the months since their abilities had become public knowledge, she had grown into her role as their spokesperson with a confidence that made Marcus proud and slightly envious. Her blindness, once seen as a disability, had become her greatest strength in navigating the complex politics of interspecies relations. The accusations against them were serious. The Kethmori Empire, backed by several other aggressive civilizations, claimed that human consciousness manipulation constituted a form of mental warfare that violated the most fundamental laws of galactic civilization. They wanted humans quarantined to their home system and all research into consciousness bridging banned permanently. Ambassador Thalkara of the Kethmori stepped forward, her scaled form radiating contempt. Honored council members, we stand before a threat unlike any our galaxy has faced. These humans possess the ability to alter reality itself through thought and emotion. Combined with Vorthak sensory enhancement, they represent a weapon of unimaginable power. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Marcus could feel the fear and uncertainty emanating from hundreds of different species, each wondering what human consciousness manipulation might mean for their own civilizations. The evidence is undeniable, Ambassador Thalkara continued. They have demonstrated the ability to heal genetic defects, manipulate quantum fields, and even temporarily restore lost sensory functions. But these same abilities could be used to rewrite the fundamental structure of matter, to control the minds of other beings, to reshape entire worlds according to human desires. Princess Zarathel requested permission to respond, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. Honored council members, I speak as someone who has experienced these abilities firsthand. My husband's consciousness does not control or dominate, it heals and creates. The fear you hear in these accusations stems from a fundamental misunderstanding of how human consciousness actually functions. She moved to the center of the platform, her confidence evident despite being surrounded by beings she couldn't see. Human emotional consciousness doesn't impose its will on reality. It collaborates with reality. It finds the patterns that already exist and helps them manifest more fully. When my sight was temporarily restored, it wasn't because Marcus forced my eyes to work. It was because his love created a resonance field that allowed my own healing potential to express itself. Marcus stepped forward to join her. If I may add something, our research has shown that these abilities require specific emotional states. They only work when the human involved feels genuine love, compassion, or desire to heal. Negative emotions like hatred, greed, or desire for control actually suppress the effect entirely. This statement caused another stir through the assembly. Several representatives leaned forward, clearly intrigued by the implications. Dr. Vashtel of the Alterian Federation, one of the galaxy's most respected scientists, stood to address the assembly. If Dr. Chen's statement is accurate, it would suggest that these abilities are naturally self-limiting. They cannot be weaponized because the very act of trying to use them as weapons would prevent them from functioning. Ambassador Thalkara's scales flushed a deep purple that Marcus had learned indicated extreme agitation in her species. You're asking us to trust the word of the very beings who pose this threat. How convenient that their dangerous abilities supposedly only work when they're feeling benevolent. Then, test it, Princess Zarathel said simply. The Council has extensive facilities for consciousness research. Put us under controlled conditions with independent monitors from multiple species. Have Dr. Chen attempt to use his abilities while experiencing negative emotions. The suggestion sparked immediate debate among the Council members. Some species were eager to study human consciousness under laboratory conditions, while others feared that even controlled testing might be dangerous. It was Elder Mordun of the Ancient Crystalline Collective who provided the wisdom that moved the debate forward. His species had been exploring consciousness for millions of years, long before most current civilizations had even achieved spaceflight. In our experience, Elder Mordun said, his harmonic voice resonating through crystalline formations throughout his section of the chamber, consciousness abilities always reflect the fundamental nature of the species that possesses them. If humans can only access these powers through positive emotional states, it tells us something important about their essential character. The testing phase lasted 3 weeks and involved the most comprehensive consciousness research project in galactic history. Marcus found himself subjected to emotional stimuli designed to provoke everything from rage to despair while attempting to manipulate quantum fields under controlled conditions. The results were conclusive. Negative emotional states not only prevented him from using his abilities but actually created interference patterns that disrupted quantum coherence in the surrounding area. Even more significantly, the research team discovered that other species could learn to create similar interference effects through focused meditation and emotional control. Rather than being a uniquely human weapon, consciousness manipulation turned out to be a naturally occurring phenomenon that required specific emotional frequencies to function. The breakthrough came when Dr. Vashtel suggested testing whether other species could learn to generate the positive emotional states that enabled human-style reality manipulation. Working with volunteers from a dozen different civilizations, the research team discovered that while each species expressed emotions differently, the underlying quantum mechanics were universal. A Vorthack engineer learned to heal metal fatigue and damaged hull plating by focusing on what her species called structural harmony. An Alterian philosopher managed to accelerate plant growth by contemplating the beauty of biological systems. Even a Kethmori warrior, despite her species' aggressive nature, successfully repaired damaged computer circuits by channeling what she described as protective love for her ship. The implications revolutionized everything the galaxy thought it knew about consciousness, technology, and the nature of reality itself. Rather than being a uniquely human threat, consciousness manipulation turned out to be a potential ability that any species could develop, given the right understanding and emotional framework. But the discoveries also created new problems. If consciousness manipulation could be learned, it meant that the military applications weren't limited to humans. Several aggressive civilizations immediately began training programs designed to weaponize these abilities, despite the research showing that negative emotions prevented them from working. The crisis came when the Destroyer caste, a militant faction within the Kethmori Empire, attempted to forcibly conscript human children for consciousness warfare training. Their plan was to condition young humans from birth to associate positive emotions with military objectives, essentially creating living weapons that could reshape reality according to Kethmori interests. The kidnapping attempt failed thanks to the Earth Collective's intervention, but it galvanized public opinion across the galaxy. Species that had been neutral in the consciousness debate suddenly realized that uncontrolled development of these abilities could destabilize the entire galactic order. It was Princess Zarathel who proposed the solution that ultimately saved human civilization from becoming a target for every aggressive species in the galaxy. Speaking before an emergency session of the Galactic Council, she outlined a framework that would become known as the Consciousness Accords. "The abilities we've discovered are not weapons," she declared. "They are tools for healing, creation, and cooperation. But, like any powerful tool, they require wisdom and restraint to use properly. I propose that we establish a Galactic Institute for Consciousness Research, with representatives from every major civilization. This institute would study these abilities openly, develop ethical guidelines for their use, and train individuals from all species who show aptitude." Marcus added his support to the proposal. "The key insight from our research is that these abilities require emotional maturity and genuine compassion to function. Any training program would necessarily focus on developing those qualities. We wouldn't be creating weapons, we'd be creating healers and builders." The debate that followed lasted for days and involved complex negotiations between species with vastly different philosophies about consciousness, individual rights, and collective security. But, gradually, a consensus emerged around the idea that consciousness manipulation was too important and too dangerous to leave unregulated. The final agreement established the Galactic Institute for Consciousness Studies, with Earth serving as its headquarters due to humans' natural aptitude for the abilities. The institute would be governed by a council representing all major civilizations, with strict protocols for research, training, and application of consciousness manipulation techniques. Most importantly, the Accords established that consciousness manipulation could only be used for healing, environmental restoration, and peaceful construction projects. Any attempt to weaponize these abilities would result in immediate intervention by a joint galactic task force. As Marcus and Princess Zarathel signed the documents that would reshape galactic civilization, he reflected on the strange journey that had brought them to this moment. They had started as strangers united by political necessity and had become partners in the most significant scientific and spiritual breakthrough in galactic history. "Are you ready for this?" Zarathel asked as they prepared to return to Earth for the Institute's inauguration. Marcus looked around the assembly chamber, filled with beings who had once seen humanity as either a threat or a curiosity. Now they were partners in exploration of consciousness itself. "I don't think anyone could be ready for this," he said. "But I can't think of anyone I'd rather face it with." As their ship departed for Earth, Marcus realized that their marriage had achieved everything the original diplomats had hoped for and infinitely more. They hadn't just prevented a war, they had opened a new chapter in galactic civilization. And, somehow, along the way, they had found something that neither of them had been looking for: genuine love that transcended species, biology, and every barrier that should have made it impossible. 2 years after the signing of the Consciousness Accords, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Galactic Institute for Consciousness Studies, watching Earth rotate slowly beneath them. The planet looked different now, not because it had changed physically, but because he understood it in ways that would have been impossible before his marriage to Princess Zarathel. The hidden networks that the Earth Collective had revealed were now visible to anyone with the proper equipment, creating geometric patterns of light that painted the continents in ever-shifting mandalas of energy. More importantly, similar networks were beginning to appear on worlds throughout the galaxy as other species learned to consciously cooperate with their planetary biospheres. "The morning reports," Zarathel said, entering the observation deck with a data tablet that translated visual information into tactile patterns she could read. Despite the fact that their emotional connection now allowed her to see occasionally, she still preferred to navigate the world through her other senses most of the time. Marcus took the tablet and reviewed the daily summary of consciousness research projects happening across the galaxy. A Vorthak agricultural team had successfully restored a dead ocean on their homeworld by teaching fish consciousness to regenerate itself. Alterian healers had cured a plague by helping the affected population develop emotional states that boosted their immune systems. Even the aggressive Kethmori had established a project to heal the ecological damage their industrial expansion had caused. "The most interesting development is from the Centauri system," Zarathel continued. "They've established the first multi-species consciousness collective, beings from 6 different civilizations working together to terraform a previously uninhabitable world." Marcus smiled, remembering when such cooperation would have been considered impossible. "What about the resistance movements? Any new developments there?" Despite the success of the Consciousness Accords, not everyone in the galaxy supported the new paradigm. Several isolated civilizations had declared consciousness manipulation to be a form of mental contamination and had cut off contact with the rest of galactic society. More concerning were the underground movements that continued to seek ways to weaponize consciousness abilities despite all evidence showing it was impossible. 3 more attempted kidnappings of Institute trainees, Zarathel reported. All unsuccessful, but the pattern is concerning. Someone is still trying to create the conditions for consciousness warfare. This was the shadow that hung over their success. No matter how thoroughly they proved that consciousness manipulation required positive emotional states to function, there were always those who believed they could find a way around the limitation. The Institute had become a target for everyone from idealistic revolutionaries to cynical profiteers who saw consciousness abilities as the ultimate weapon. Marcus was about to respond when their personal communicator chimed with an urgent message from Dr. Vashtel. The Alterian scientist had become one of their closest collaborators in consciousness research, and she rarely contacted them unless something significant had developed. "Marcus, Zarathel, we need you in the laboratory immediately," her translated voice said. "We've made a discovery that changes everything we thought we knew about consciousness bridging." They found Dr. Vashtel in the Institute's primary research facility, surrounded by displays showing consciousness field patterns that were unlike anything Marcus had seen before. The readings were impossibly complex, showing interaction between multiple species consciousness patterns that created emergent properties far beyond what any individual mind could achieve. "What are we looking at?" Marcus asked. "The future," Dr. Vashtel replied. "We've been monitoring the consciousness collective in the Centauri system, and something extraordinary is happening. The 6 species working together aren't just combining their individual abilities, they're creating entirely new forms of consciousness that exist at the collective level. Princess Zarathel moved closer to the displays, her enhanced senses allowing her to perceive the data in ways that visual interpretation couldn't capture. The resonance patterns are unlike anything I've encountered. It's as if the collective has developed its own awareness, separate from but connected to the individuals who comprise it. The implications hit Marcus like a lightning bolt. You're saying that consciousness bridging can create new forms of sentient life? Not create, discover. These collective consciousness patterns appear to have been potential properties of reality all along. The multi-species cooperation in the Centauri system is just allowing them to manifest. Dr. Vashtel brought up additional data showing similar but less developed patterns emerging on worlds where the Institute had established multi-species research teams. It's happening everywhere we have sustained consciousness cooperation between different types of beings. We're not just healing individual problems, we're midwifing the birth of entirely new forms of awareness. The discovery prompted an emergency session of the Institute's Governing Council. Representatives from dozens of species gathered to discuss what this development might mean for galactic civilization. Some were excited by the possibilities, while others worried about the implications of consciousness evolution occurring at such a rapid pace. Elder Mordun of the Crystalline Collective provided the historical perspective that helped put the discovery in context. In our species' long experience with consciousness, we have observed that awareness naturally seeks greater complexity and connection. What you are witnessing is the next step in consciousness evolution, the development of truly interspecies awareness. But, what does that mean for us as individuals? Asked Commander Vextar, who had become the military liaison to the Institute. If collective consciousness becomes dominant, what happens to personal identity? It was Princess Zarathel who provided the insight that would guide their response to this new development. From my observations of the consciousness patterns, individual awareness isn't being absorbed or eliminated. Instead, it's becoming part of something larger while retaining its unique characteristics. Think of it like a symphony, each instrument maintains its individual voice while contributing to something greater than the sum of its parts. Marcus found himself thinking about his own relationship with Zarathel. Their consciousness bridging hadn't eliminated their individual personalities, if anything, it had enhanced them by providing new perspectives and capabilities that neither could achieve alone. I think we need to approach this as we've approached everything else, he said. Study it carefully, develop ethical guidelines, and let it evolve naturally rather than trying to force or prevent it. The months that followed were filled with intensive research into collective consciousness phenomena. The Institute established monitoring stations throughout the galaxy to track the development of multi-species awareness wherever it emerged. They discovered that collective consciousness required the same positive emotional foundations as individual consciousness manipulation. It could only develop in environments characterized by cooperation, mutual respect, and genuine affection between species. The breakthrough that would define the future came when Marcus and Zarathel volunteered to participate in an experimental collective consciousness session with representatives from 12 different species. The goal was to understand how collective awareness functioned from the inside while maintaining detailed monitoring from outside observers. The experience was indescribable. For several hours, Marcus existed simultaneously as himself and as part of a larger awareness that encompassed ways of thinking and perceiving that no single species could achieve. He experienced time as the crystalline beings did, perceived electromagnetic spectrums as the Vorthak did, and understood mathematical relationships as the Eltarians did, all while remaining fundamentally human. But, the most profound aspect of the collective consciousness wasn't the expanded capabilities, it was the emotional connection. The collective didn't just think faster or perceive more, it felt with a depth and complexity that transcended anything possible for individual awareness. Love, compassion, and understanding became foundational forces that shaped reality at the quantum level. When the session ended, Marcus found himself changed in ways that would take months to fully understand. He hadn't lost his individual identity, but he had gained something that felt like coming home after a long journey. Now I understand why consciousness manipulation requires positive emotions, he told Zarathel as they debriefed from the experience. Love and compassion aren't just requirements for the abilities to work, they're the actual mechanism by which consciousness shapes reality. The research results from the collective consciousness experiments revolutionized galactic society once again. The discovery that multi-species awareness could solve problems that individual consciousness couldn't address led to the establishment of collective research teams for the galaxy's greatest challenges: faster-than-light travel, matter conversion, even communication with forms of life so alien that no single species could establish contact. But the most significant impact was philosophical. The existence of collective consciousness that transcended species boundaries began to break down the barriers that had divided galactic civilization for millions of years. Species that had been enemies for centuries found common ground in their shared participation in collective awareness projects. Marcus and Zarathel found themselves at the center of this transformation, serving as examples of how individual relationships could bridge species differences while contributing to larger collective consciousness phenomena. Their marriage had become a template that other interspecies couples followed, leading to a new generation of beings who were literally children of multiple species consciousness traditions. 5 years after their wedding, as they stood together on the observation deck watching the completion of the first truly galactic collective consciousness project, an effort involving representatives from every known intelligent species, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. "Do you ever miss the simplicity of our early days?" he asked Zarathel. "When it was just you and me figuring out how to be married?" She smiled, her white eyes occasionally flickering with the prismatic light that occurred when their emotional connection was particularly strong. "I miss the privacy sometimes. But I wouldn't trade what we've built together for anything. We started with just our individual selves and created something that spans the galaxy." Marcus looked out at the stars, where projects inspired by their research were transforming entire solar systems through conscious cooperation between species that had once been strangers or enemies. The failed xenobiologist and the blind alien princess had become the foundation for a new form of galactic civilization. "I love you," he said, words that had become both more personal and more universal over the years they had spent together. "I love you too," she replied, and, for just a moment, her eyes blazed with full sight as she looked at him with all the depth of perception that their shared consciousness had made possible. In that moment, Marcus understood that their love had become something larger than either of them could have imagined, but also something that remained fundamentally personal and irreplaceably theirs. They had given the galaxy a new understanding of consciousness, cooperation, and the power of genuine connection between different forms of life. And, somehow, in the process of changing the universe, they had also found the kind of love that poets wrote about and philosophers debated, the kind that made everything else possible. As the first galactic collective consciousness project activated and new forms of awareness began to emerge from the cooperation between thousands of different species, Marcus knew that their story was just beginning. They had opened a door to possibilities that no one could fully comprehend, and they would spend the rest of their lives exploring what lay beyond it. Together.